So the old school view was that Greek religion and science were like oil and water, totally and completely separate. But actually lots of thinkers in early archaic Greece, the philosophers, the mythographers, and even some ascetic mystics, were into magic alongside what we would consider serious inquiries into nature, physis. The Greeks didn't really see it as a pair of mindsets at variance or one replacing the other. One example is Empedocles, a natural philosopher who also used goal-oriented magic charms and spells. At a more granular level, there's a certain ambiguity in language used for magical spells, medical remedies, and religious concepts. Words like purification, catharsis, could apply to both physical and spiritual treatments, further blurring the lines between religion, magic, and medicine. The earliest attempts to refute magical beliefs and practices, and by extension traditional religion, in Greek literature can be found in works dating back to the late 5th or early 4th century BCE. This criticism arose within the context of the diverse nature of Greek religious beliefs, which included criticism about traditional notions about the gods, starting with Hesiod's Theogony. Several 7th, 6th, and early 5th century writers, including Alcmon and Phersites, introduced new theogonic myths, drawing on both Greek and non-Greek sources. The first natural philosophers, the Milesians, also contributed to religious innovation by attempting to provide natural explanations for phenomena that had previously attributed to the gods. Xenophanes and Heraclitus stand out as prominent critics of traditional Greek religious notions, which included magic. Xenophanes condemned the immoral and anthropomorphic representations of gods in Homer and Hesiod, and he advocated for a concept of God as the divine mind. Heraclitus extended the range of religious notions under attack to include ritual purifications, praying to statues, and the Dionysiac religion. These are all traditional aspects of basic day-to-day religion in ancient Greece. An important point is that while skepticism about individual magicians or practices existed in ancient Greece, there was actually no general skepticism about magic as distinct from religion as a whole. Empedocles, a key figure in the development of physical theory, shows us how old beliefs stuck around even as people started to question the world around them in the 5th century. Back then, the lines between science and religion were extremely blurry. Now, Empedocles wasn't just a philosopher. He was also known for his engagement in what we would consider magic and the supernatural. This wasn't weird back then, this wasn't strange, because the idea of nature or physis was still being figured out. People believed that you could actually bend or break natural laws if you knew enough about them. Empedocles explored these ideas in his works, but it can be hard to tell what he actually believed. This just goes to show how much people back then were still grappling with what humans could actually know, and where the natural world ended and the supernatural world began. Medicine practiced in ancient temples of healing illustrates the complex relationship between magic, religion, and science. Ancient healing sanctuaries actually owe a huge amount to medicine. Certainly it often imitates their practices. Priests in temples use drugs, diet, and even surgery much like rationalistic physicians. This suggests a cross-pollination of ideas and methods between the two approaches, blurring the lines between magical, religious, and scientific healing practices. The Epidaurus inscriptions actually claimed practical results for temple medicine and suggested an empirical or results-oriented approach similar to that of the Hippocratic doctors, who we'll discuss in a little bit. These inscriptions were essentially testimonials, documenting a wide variety of ailments that were reportedly cured by the god, from headaches and insomnia to more severe conditions like tumors, epilepsy, and blindness. Ancient doctors were actually remarkably learned in the lore of herbal medicine and often knew very good recipes for headaches and other things that ailed them and us. Some modern discoveries have actually proceeded from such Hippocratic wisdom. For instance, the heart drug digitalis, which originated in the purple foxglove. But ancient doctors were also careful to mix in a healthy dose of magic and incantation, like the two sons of Autolycus in the 19th book of the Odyssey, who, in Odysseus' telling, healed Odysseus' wound from the boar that was attacking him. The use of amulets and charms was widespread in ancient Greece. This was to prevent sickness on a daily basis or to encourage good health and luck generally. The use of amulets and charms was universal. The Hippocratic corpus is a collection of about 60 medical writings that cover a wide range of topics, including the treatment of illnesses and injuries that we would recognize today. The oldest book in the corpus is thought to be from around 450 to 400 BCE. The relationship between medical writers and natural philosophers is complex and multifaceted. While medical writers like the author of On the Sacred Disease, which we will discuss in a little bit, insisted on natural causes for diseases and aligned with philosophers' inquiries, figures like Empedocles actually bridged the gap between natural philosophy and traditional religious healing practices. In the classical period, various types of healers existed alongside those represented in the Hippocratic corpus, including herb collectors, drug sellers, midwives, and practitioners of temple medicine. The lines between these categories were extremely blurry, and there was no standardized professional medical qualification. The author of On Ancient Medicine actually attacked doctors who used hypotheses or postulates, basically theories, to explain things. The author apparently sees this kind of theorizing as something philosophers do, and he's not really having it in a very respectable field of medicine. He thinks it's just a trendy new way of doing things, the new school, and he's sticking to old school methods. But here's where it gets even better. This author lays out his own ideas of what the body's made of and what causes diseases. It's not all that different from the theories he's criticizing. The physiological and the pathological theories he singles out for particular criticism are those based on the hot and the cold and the wet and the dry. And he pays particular attention to arguing that the hot and the cold are among the weakest powers in the body. Yet ironically, when he comes to present his own view concerning what the body is composed of and what causes diseases, he then turns around and describes the body's components as salty, bitter, sweet, acidic, astringent, and insipid. Very similar. Now, in fairness, his system is a bit more complex than just hot and cold. He says there are tons of different components with different powers over the body, and they vary in strength and number. But the problem is he's still really vague about what all these salty and bitter things actually are inside of us. He has all these fancy ideas about how to figure out what causes diseases, but he can't actually connect the dots and show how these different components lead to actual pathologies. And it gets even weirder. He believes that treatment should mostly involve using common substances and watching your diet, which makes sense. But the way that he explains why these things work is just as random and almost as arbitrary and dogmatic as the theorist that speaks in terms of the hot and the cold and the wet and the dry, the pre-Socratic that he was arguing with. So the author of On Ancient Medicine is all about the idea that theory should be testable, which sounds good in theory. But in practice, it falls short. Given that it was not feasible to investigate what goes on inside the body directly, the author actually has an alternative procedure to propose, that of studying the changes that take place in substances outside the body. This would allow us to draw inferences by analogy concerning what happens inside the body. Yet the gap between theory and practice here is still extremely wide. He's got big ideas, but he doesn't quite manage to put them into practice in a convincing way. But the Hippocratic corpus is not univocal on this issue of scientific practice and magic, to say the least. The author of On the Sacred Disease explicitly criticizes magical notions, particularly in the context of treating the sacred disease, which is now understood to be epilepsy. Purifiers, vagabonds, and charlatans use the concept of the divine to mask their inability to provide effective treatment for patients. He accuses them of ignorance, deceit, inconsistency, and impiety. The author rejects magic entirely, stating that whether they claim to be able to do it by rites or by some other knowledge and practice, they seem to be impious liars and cheats. They use special pleading and secondary elaborations to excuse their own failures. This is interesting and similar to how cunning folk in Tudor and Stuart England would blame witchcraft for their inability to cure their own patients. Of course, the author provides a detailed, albeit often inaccurate and crazy, naturalistic explanation of the sacred disease, attributing it to the brain being flooded with phlegm, particularly when the south wind prevails. He even backed it up with observations about which populations got sick more often, and even suggested cutting open a goat's head to see what its brain looked like. The persistence of magical beliefs and practices in ancient Greece can be perhaps explained by emphasizing that the development of science and philosophy did not eradicate magic. In different stages, there was a different balance between the two. Magic adapted and evolved alongside religion and science, rather than simply disappearing. For example, the systemization of traditional astrological knowledge in temple medicine reflected the influence and borrows ideas and practices from science and philosophy. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching. We're going to leave it here for right now. As always, there's much more to discuss. If you like this video, please do like and subscribe. It would obviously help me out very much. It's good to see you guys again. If you're interested in watching the first part of this series about the relationship between magic and religion, take a look at this video right here. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.